Hi boys and girls, welcome back to Story Time with Miss Sharp. And today I'm going to continue with another nonfiction book, one of my favorites. And you guys know I'm a beekeeper and I love my sweet bees. They are amazing. And so I wanted to just share some facts with you from my nonfiction book on bees. But this kind of looks like a fiction book, doesn't it? The illustrations, they're so happy and bright and colorful. I just love, love, love this book. So I wanted to share some parts of it with you today because it is packed full of serious information. So let's get started. I wanted to show you the anatomy of the honeybee. Since I'm out there every day dealing with them, I see them all the time, but I don't see them like the anatomy of it broken down into parts like they've illustrated in this book for us. So I wanted to share that with you because it's just amazing to me. And let's take a quick look. See that big old bee right there? They're not that big, are they? They're like the size from here to the end of my finger. From here up. That's about how big they really are. But this is kind of like a close-up for you. So you can see their body. And the wings here. And they're covered with all these little hair follicles. And that helps the pollen stick to their body so that when they get back to the hive, you know, that they can take it. They use their little arms and feet up here. They have little grasping pinchers like that they can pull the wax off of their abdomen with, because they have glands under here where they make the wax and they peel it off in little sheets kind of like, and then they use their mouth to chew up the wax to form it into the honeycomb. So like their little structure and how they're created is just amazing. And this is like a really close up illustration of the stinger. And you see how it's got these little barbs on it? Do you know that every time a honeybee stings someone, the barb, the stinger, it sticks in our skin and it pulls out of the abdomen, the back of the abdomen of the bee, and then the bee dies. So the bee doesn't want to sting anybody. The bee just is protecting the colony. They're very protective, and they have to protect the queen. She's the person, or the role, the most important one in the colony. She lays almost 2,000 eggs a day. Can you believe that? Almost 2,000, up to 2,000 every single day. So she's very important to keeping the colony going, and I'm going to explain just a little bit about why that is so important, because most bees only live up to about 5, maybe 6 weeks long, and then the new eggs are, you know, hatching and developing and becoming new bees to take over the work of the older bees that died. So that's just a picture of the anatomy of the bee. So here's basically starting off like the life cycle. So here's the queen. As you can see, the queen looks a little different than the bees. She has a longer body than everybody else, and she's dropping little tiny eggs that you can see. They look like little white, almost like the letter C a little bit. That's the egg. And then the bees, the worker bees, They take care of protecting it, fanning it, keeping it the right temperature. And then they also, as the eggs begin to grow, they're feeding it. They're feeding each one of these eggs with pollen and nectar from flowers that they've gathered. And then, you see their little eyes? Because they're living in there. They're like little white grubs is what they look like when they're inside of there. But then they eventually hatch into a full-grown bee. Here's another picture of inside, what they look like. And then this shows you from the time that the queen lays the egg, can you see that? To it growing, they're feeding it. It's growing and they're feeding it some more. It's growing bigger and bigger. And look where it starts to look like a bee a little bit. Can you see the stripes and the body changing? Yep. And then here, the last row, showing you the development inside of each one of those cells. And these will become worker bees, okay? When they decide that they need another queen because the colony's growing so big, they're going to have a new queen, and then some of those existing bees are going to take off and go find another home with their queen. They grow a new queen, and this is what a queen cell looks like. Can you see that? It's big, it sticks up, it's not flat into the cells like the rest of the bees. They decide when they need to grow a new queen, and they do that by feeding her different kinds of food. And one of the things that they feed her is called royal jelly. And you may have heard of that before, but it's a different combination of honey and pollen and water that they create, and the enzymes are different, and they create that, and they feed that different diet to the new queen that's developing. And eventually she chews her way out. Here she is. She like kind of cuts the top of the egg cell off, and then she comes out and she becomes the new queen of the colony. Isn't that amazing? Now you can start to see why I love bees so much. They're just so interesting. Bees communicate in a lot of different ways. You know, we're communicating through technology, aren't we? So like we do texting, and that's one way we can communicate. We can email each other. We can get on different platforms like Seesaw, and we get on Zoom, and we can see each other, and I can do lessons like this and read stories to you guys, and you can use YouTube. That's some of the different ways that we communicate right now because of us not being in school, right? But the bees communicate in different ways just like we do. So they have this round dance. It tells a forager, or somebody that goes out to find food, it tells them where all the nearby flowers are. So, excuse me. So it gives the direction of, hey, there's a flower field. It's like 3,000 yards away to the east of us. You need to go over there and get the nectar. And then there's another one that like they tell the greater distance from the hive to the flowers. So they kind of like say, okay, it's in this direction and it's this far away. And the bigger that their dance gives a design to, the farther away that they know the flowers are going to be. And here's just a little illustration showing you how the direction that they dance in to give other bees the information they communicate on how to get to where they need to go to get nectar and pollen. So, pollination. You guys know what pollination is? Pollination is when the pollen from different plants are shared. So, we have a lot of people say, oh, the pollen is getting to my eyes, or it's really bothering my sinuses right now. Yes, that does happen. It does, because there's so much blooming and all this yellow stuff from inside the blossoms is being blown around by the wind. But it's really important for the bees to get the pollen and to go back to the hive with it and feed the new bees growing. But they also go from flower to flower to flower to flower. So when they pick up pollen from, let's say, the apple blossom that's blooming right now in our trees, and then they say, oh wait, there's a peach tree over here and it's blooming, and then they fly over to the peach tree, well, guess what? They drop a little bit of pollen from the apple blossom into the peach blossom, and the peach blossom benefits from that, and it helps them to grow stronger, and it helps them to grow more fruit. And then they might pick up some pollen from the fruit tree blossoms and then go over to the cucumbers that are blossoming in your garden. And the cucumbers get some pollen from the one cucumber to another cucumber to another cucumber, maybe to some zucchini and some yellow squash and tomato plants, and all the pollination is what helps plants continue to survive and to produce food. And we cannot live without them, because the bees help the food to continue to grow. We have to have them. They're so important. And so one of the things I like to share with people is how you can not use toxic chemicals and poisons in your yard to kill weeds or to kill insects, because guess what? The bees get that, and then that kills them, and they can even carry it back to the hive and kill many bees. And that is one of the biggest problems we have with nature today, is that the bees are dying because of so many toxic chemicals that we use on our lawns. So we're very careful out here on our farm to make sure that we don't use any kinds of poisons or weed killers. That's poison too, because we know that the bees are going to land on it, and we know that it's going to kill them. And we also know that they can easily make it back to the hive with poison on their body or on their feet and affect the other not animals, well, they are animals, but the other bees in the hive with that poison. And that's so important that we're just very careful not to do that. But here's a picture of so many different flowers and their pollen, and you can see the bees inside going down into them, landing on them. And then they pack their back legs. They'll pack on the pollen to their back legs until it looks like little orange bulbs on their legs. Here's one you can see. I'll show you. Point this one out. It's so cute. Can you see that? The little orange bulbs on the back of their legs. And then they take it back to the hive and they just start scraping it off, and they put it into cells and they feed it to the queen, because she doesn't leave. She stays in the hive and she's busy laying eggs all day. Fruits and vegetables that need bees to grow. Let me read a little bit to you. Not only do bees provide us with honey, but they also help us grow lots of other delicious foods. Without bees to carry their pollen, some plants couldn't make fruits or seeds. Apples, pears, plums, cherries, and watermelons, they all need bees to grow. Pollination is also needed by cucumbers and peppers, which might seem like vegetables, but they're actually really fruits. They're full of seeds that can be planted to grow new plants. And speaking of seeds, how about the tasty seeds from pumpkins and sunflowers and sesame, or coffee beans that we roast and grind to make our coffee? Bees help all of these things to grow, and pollination is just as important to grow plants whose fruit and seeds that we don't eat, such as beets and carrots and leeks and cabbages and cauliflower and broccoli. Whew. Farmers also need seeds to sow in their fields, so they must save a few of their vegetables, few of these vegetables from the dinner table and let them blossom in the spring. Well, this means that they can be pollinated to provide the farmer with seeds for the next planting season. Some plants can also self-pollinate, but the pollination done by bees is usually a much better pollination. Self-pollinating sunflowers and coffee plants, they produce fewer seeds. And self-pollinating species of peppers and strawberries and pomegranates, they're just as plump, but they don't produce as many. Honeybees aren't the only insects that pollinate crops, though, but they are certainly the most skilled at it. That means they do a much better job at it. It's impossible to overestimate the role that bees play in farming. They even help with the production of milk and meat by pollinating alfalfa and clover and letting these plants spread their seeds all over the pastures where farm animals graze. If that wasn't enough, bees also help to pollinate cotton flowers, and when these grow big and fluffy, they're harvested and they are turned into cotton for our clothes, like what I'm wearing in this apron is 100% cotton. So bees do an awful lot of amazing things besides make honey. I hope you enjoyed just that little bit of information about how and why I love bees so much. And I'll be seeing you soon.